All right. We're going to tackle the first three issues of this last original Marvel Year's Star Wars Omnibus. These are three self contained issues. We'll start with annual number three, which is the final annual. They're all written by Joe Duffy. In this, our our heroes end up on a planet that's Imperial controlled, but there are two young men, I believe teenagers, that work in a mine that are trying to help our rebel friends. And they want to be Jedi, essentially. One of them, their dads, was a Jedi, allegedly. Not a lot to this story. I did like it, though, because we get probably the best written Darth Vader we've gotten that wasn't a movie adaptation Darth Vader. Although we do have this goofy guy that's polishing Vader's boots all the time, which I think is humor for children, but I didn't find it all that funny. But we get an interesting juxtaposition between the two characters, and it doesn't end the way you think it would, which is nice. And the only reason I even have talked this much about this issue is the two teenage guy characters are interesting to read. It's just the usual stuff from our typical main characters, and I'm kind of not here for it at this point. Also, I need to make something clear. They're still looking for the rebel spy, the rebel agent that they've been looking for several issues. And those issues happen to be after Shadows of the Empire, because it involves the Bothan tapes. And that doesn't make any sense with Shadows of the Empire, because a lot of these issues don't make any sense with Shadows of the Empire or with the established expanded universe. Because it was ignored for so long, and they just didn't really retcon these properly. Whether they were going to or not, I'm not sure. I would assume they would eventually make this stuff make sense, but they just never got to it because the Disney buyout happened. So, with that being said, these next two issues are after Shadows of the Empire as well, which we're going to talk about issue 79, which is a Lando Chewie story where they're dealing with these pirates that want this artifact that I guess Han Solo stole at some point, but technically Lando has it, and Lando's wearing a weird wig. He's dressed as a really goofy pirate, and he gets pretty drunk. And he and Chewbacca end up in a speeder chase with these pirates, and that's really it. It's not great, but it was better than a lot of the Joe Duffy stuff I've read in between Empire and Jedi. So next we move on to issue 80. And in this, we finally figure out what happened with the missing rebel pilot / spy, and we deal with the Bothan tapes, as well as we get a costume reveal of what Luke's going to be wearing in the movie Return of the Jedi, which is neat. I appreciated that. C-3PO also gets a protocol droid that he's kind of into in this. That's like a woman protocol droid. He's just kind of, which is kind of silly, but I didn't mind it. It was something. No R2-D2, which is really weird. He's the only one of the character roster that's missing in these two issues. But yeah, it's kind of a weird story, but it is our lead into Return of the Jedi. Is it a good lead in? Not really. It's the Bothan tapes have, spoilers, the second Death Star plans. Now, these were already dealt with in Shadows of the Empire, but when it comes to Death Star plans and the EU, there are a lot of them. I mean, how many Death Star plans have been, for the first Death Star, have been ascertained by the rebels. I can think of at least three. We got Kyle Katarn. We got the Twi'lek from the PSP / DS game called Lethal Alliance. There's several brought up in the book Death Star. Battlefront 2. We talk about getting the plans from Polis Massa in the 501st campaign. There's a lot of them. So there's probably multiple variants of the second Death Star plans, and of course they don't have complete plans because they don't know that the Death Star is fully operational. Because the Emperor withheld that information from pretty much everyone. So it's something. I don't mind that. What I do mind is that these issues are very lackluster, and this whole looking for this rebel pilot storyline has been just filler, and none of these issues have been particularly good. So I'll get to my my rankings of these issues. The annual number 3, I give 3.5 out of 5 stars. Issue 79, give about 2.8 out of 5 stars. And then issue 80 will get a 3 out of 5. It's just okay. I liked it more than I've liked a lot of the Joe Duffy stuff. I think it's because I took a break for a little while and just kind of recharged for a bit. Also, I've been reading a lot of the EU that leads into Return of the Jedi recently. Like, I've been doing a reread of Shadows of the Empire. As you know, a month ago I finished The Bounty Hunter Wars, which deals with the beginning of Return of the Jedi. And kind of concludes alongside the climax of Return of the Jedi. I actually plan on doing a reread of Truce of Bakura next, because it's been a very long time before I jump into Mara Jade by the Emperor's Hand. I'll probably do review in a couple weeks. Stay tuned for that. But what is my opinion on the Marvel comics between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi? I really like a lot of the David Michelinie comics. Part of the problem with between Empire and Jedi is that Empire Strikes Back ends on one of the greatest cliffhangers in cinema history. And you can't bring back Han Solo. And a lot of the authors really liked writing Han Solo. And a lot of them didn't like writing Lando, which is very frustrating because I argue that Lando is he's a much more fun character, and you can do a lot of things with him. And David Michelinie kind of proved that. If it weren't for David Michelinie, I think all this stuff should just not be considered canon. Because most of it's terrible, and it's got really, like, truly baffling continuity. And like, truly, some of those comics are some of the worst comic books I've ever read in my life. I mean, Larry Hama wrote the worst, in my opinion, the worst issue of his entire career. And I really like Larry Hama as an author, but he was not meant to write Star Wars. And it was very clear Archie Goodwin was pretty much done after Empire. I think he wrote a couple issues, which weren't good after Empire. And it was very clear that Star Wars, the way he'd been writing Star Wars, was getting old. And he was just not meant to continue it. So Michelinie stuff, I think, for the most part, is good, except for the Wedge issue, which I said was a Joe Duffy issue when I reviewed it. That would be issue 78. That's not true. It's a David Michelinie issue. I apologize. And I just don't like that issue. It felt very rushed to fill a deadline. But yeah, the Joe Duffy stuff, and I'm hoping it's what I remember reading, because I've read some of these post Return of the Jedi Marvel issues, and I remember liking a lot of them. There's some interesting stuff in here, post Jedi, that Joe Duffy does, but I never associate Joe Duffy with the Empire, between Empire and Jedi stuff, even though she wrote quite a bit of it, because I don't think she had a grasp of what she wanted Star Wars to be. I don't think she quite got it here. Like I said, with these three issues, we're getting a little better. Like her writing of Darth Vader's improved exponentially in with the third annual, but like for the most part, um, there's a lot of floundering. Luke's force powers are never consistent in these issues. He can do outrageous feats in the force in some issues, and other issues it's like he can barely do anything. So like I don't, it's just inconsistent. Leia is by far the worst character in these issues. I mean, did we forget um, they were repurposed John Carter comics that they shoehorned Leia into, and she's just missing Alderaan and like falls in love with like a man who's married. What it like Leia's fallen in love with all sorts of rando men, none of which are either Lando or Luke. There is a little bit of the Luke Leia love triangle thing, but it's nowhere near as pushed as Archie Goodwin pushed it before Empire. But this is a woman that loves Han Solo. I mean, she has a love for Luke, and in my opinion, the only author that really handled this properly, and it's because it came out after Jedi, is Steve Perry with Shadows of the Empire, where she has feelings for Luke, but it's something that involves kind of the Force, and it's a love of siblings, even though they don't know they're siblings yet. The days of Splinter of the Mind's Eye are gone for them. Right? She's dedicated to finding Han Solo. And that's another frustrating thing, is it takes forever to hunt for Han Solo, which is what we should be doing this whole time. Unfortunately, it's in our time, 3 years of them hunting Han Solo, so they have to do other things. I do like establishing a new rebel base with the Hujibs. That on the Hujib planet, I really like that. I like that Riken's a regular character. Um, it's nice that we bring him back for on a regular basis. And I don't mind the Hujibs. I don't. But there are just certain things overall with the writing quality, especially with Joe Duffy's stuff. I mean, the whole Zeltron thing is kind of fun. But the Zeltrons are not to where they would be when John Ostrander would use them in Legacy, right? Or hell, I mean, they're brought in to the Republic comics, I believe, too. Zeltrons are a regular alien species in the comics. So, I appreciate them existing. They haven't fully gotten to where they will be. But, yeah, I just don't think this era of comics is enjoyable to read unless you either grew up with these comics and you have a nostalgia for them. Which, okay, I get that. A lot of people don't like Jedi Academy, but I have a fondness for it because my parents read them to me not long after they came out in the 90s and I was a little boy. So, like, I have a love of Bantam, even though the Bantam books, are they the best? No, but, you know, I have a nostalgia for them, so, you know, it does cloud my vision, my objective vision of reviewing things sometimes. Although I think the Bantam books get more hate than they deserve. They were still trying to figure out what works in a Star Wars book and what doesn't work. Um, but yeah, this stuff, these Marvel comics, they're tedious. I think the other reason you would like them is if you like '80s comics in general, or like you like reading like old comics for historical purposes, like on how they're written, because we really, especially in that second omnibus and in this somewhat, even though we're not very far in, you can tell it has more of a modern writing style than say Archie Goodwin's stuff or Chris Claremont's stuff, where they're very text heavy, and then there's art on top of it, and there's too much text for the art. It's very frustrating. It's like when the monologuing in Sin City happens, only not as well written. Nowhere near as well written, especially with Chris Claremont. Hot take, I'm not a Chris Claremont fan. I think everyone knows that by now. I find his stuff, reading any of his work in general, very dated. I appreciate what he did for X-Men, but like I do not care to read it. I feel like that is a reasonable thing to say. I'm not gonna say he's an awful writer. I wouldn't agree with that. I just think that it's just not for me. So yeah. Anyway, this has gone on longer than I expected. So anyway, you have a nice day.